This episode is brought to you by WeatherGuard Lightning Tech. At WeatherGuard, we make wind turbine lightning protection easy. If you're a wind farm operator, stop settling for damaged turbine blades and constant downtime. Get your uptime back with our Strike Tape lightning protection system. Learn more in today's show notes or visit weatherguardwind.com/striketape. All right, welcome back to the Uptime Podcast. I'm your co-host, Dan Blewett. We are going to be without our fearless host, Alan Hall, today. He is out of town, but we're going to go ahead. We've got a great episode. Today, we're talking to Byron Martin and Dan Morgan from Teknologize. Byron Martin is CEO and Dan Morgan is their CTO. So really interesting conversation. We wanted to have them on the show because as an IT providing company, they help connect wind farms with the IT solutions that they need to stay up and running. So obviously on the show, uptime is, that's the title. That's our sort of overall theme. And with these machines and these wind sites becoming more and more, data driven and analytics driven and just very tech heavy, it's no longer just, a sea of mechanical devices. There is so much technology going on behind the scenes. And the IT departments that help to run these wind sites and keep them up and keep them, making the proper upgrades over the years, they're just a really integral part of the process. So in today's show, you're going to hear Mr. Martin and Mr. Morgan, talk about their experience helping wind farms get connected, how they help them upgrade, how they help them make financial decisions and make sensible decisions. Because as we all know, upgrading your technology is not easy. There's always like a new laptop. Next year, like, do you get this? Get the one? Do you get the 2019 model, or do you, wait for the 2020 model? There's always new upgrades. Technology changes so fast. It's a really, honestly, difficult problem, even for someone like me. Like, do I get the new laptop? Is that going to make my life easier? Is it going to be worth the upgrade? Is this one going to be, what I need for a lower price point? Like, how much do I need to spend to do the job that I want to do? All these problems have major applications for major companies with this high-tech machinery. And when we're talking about, the need to put out hundreds of megawatts from every and gigawatts from some of these wind sites, they've got to have their technology on point. They cannot have downtime. They cannot have outages, and they cannot have hiccups. So a really interesting conversation today. We also touched on towards the end, so I'd really advise you to stick around to the very end, on cybersecurity, which is something that's affecting businesses of all sectors, of all sizes, of all security levels. And what I mean by that is even cybersecurity companies get breached, which is crazy. So we talk a lot about cybersecurity at the end, which has relevance to everyone in every industry. And they talk about that from the standpoint of not only broadly, but also specific to wind sites, because again, you get breached, things could go very, very wrong in a hurry. So I want to thank our guests, Byron Martin and Dan Morgan from Teknologize. So without further ado, we're going to jump to the conversation. All right. So Byron and Dan, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. So Washington State, how's everything going out there? Obviously, it's January, so this is probably a rough time for wind energy in general, or is it kind of just business as usual?
I think it's business as usual.
Yeah, no, I think, it's, we've had at least here, we've had a light winter. So, I think it's rough when we have a lot of snow or a lot of ice, but we haven't had that this year. So I think overall it's been pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the impressive things about wind power is that you think that with Mother Nature being as potentially rough as it can be in some of these like crazy, mountain ranges, and Washington can get a ton of snow, and but they seem to like carry on pretty well. So and obviously there's all these different factors, and IT being one of them. So it's not just the durability of the machine itself, governing whether these can continue to pump out power 24/7, but also their, can they stay up? Do they have any outages? Do they have any network issues? So that was kind of, part of the reason we want to have you guys on the show today, because obviously you guys help maintain some wind farms out in Washington State. So I don't think most people, as they drive out past these wind farms and as they gaze out into there, I don't think they realize how much tech is behind them, right? Like you see, like I kind of mentioned, the mechanical aspect, they're super impressive and daunting as they get, bigger and bigger, but there's a lot of tech and specifically like IT demands placed on a Wind site. So can you guys kind of kick us off and explain like how does IT connect with a wind site, and what does the modern wind farm look like from a technology standpoint?
I think from a basic standpoint, I mean, there's just a lot of infrastructure in place, right? You've got miles and miles of whether it's cabling, infrastructure such as switching and other things like that. So just in the sheer volume of components, there's just a lot of pieces that are connected together over many, many miles of infrastructure. And each turbine has, multiple switches and other components in there that all have to connect together and communicate. And the crazy thing is there's so many different systems, so many different vendors involved, so many different components, but they all have to operate in sync seamlessly in order for everything to operate and work. I mean, even if there's power generation, if there's nothing being communicated and that data is not read or communicated, then it doesn't do any good. So it's critical. It's key to the back end system. I mean, if it's absolutely necessary to have quality infrastructure, communications systems to be able to operate these wind farms.
And to touch on that, every time I'm at a site, I guarantee you I'm getting a drawing out to see how things are interconnected. Okay, we lost communication to this turbine, to turbine number 7 or whatnot, and then you're out pulling out the original drawing that was built by the engineer in the beginning to just figure out which one of these fibers, you have 4,000 to choose from, which one connects to which point, and tracking it back there. So it's really impressive how they're built and how much infrastructure is in place. They're like their own little cities.
Yeah. So Byron, so I want to kind of make sure everyone can hear who's talking, because obviously if you're watching here on YouTube, you'll be able to see Byron and Daniel. But Byron, for those who are listening and maybe can't see you, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got Teknologize started before I dive back into connecting IT with wind farms?
Yeah, you bet. IT's been part of my origin since university days. I've been went through a lot of technology training at that time, and throughout my journey and career, 11 years ago, I ended up starting this business that focused on IT support for mid-sized businesses and small businesses. And for us, it was pretty simple at that time. But as we've grown and as we've matured as an organization, we got in much more involved with heavy regulated organizations, such as wind farms, where there's a lot of not only complexity as far as infrastructure and systems and operations, but it's also highly regulated. And those we found were great opportunities for us because not everybody can step into those things. I mean, there's a lot of I should say there's a lot of folks that do IT, but not necessarily have the capacity to operate at that level and at that organization. And so through the process, how we got started is just, for us, it's typical story, word of mouth, referral, and we grew from there. And then we got in, it opened up doors with these relationships that we ended up having with these larger organizations or, wind farms, or we even do community banks and other things like that, where we were able to develop a rapport. And one of the biggest things that was a big advantage for us is, the feedback we got is that we were very approachable and we could communicate with the key players of the organization to help them understand a lot more of the why and how help them develop the strategy and planning around a lot of challenges or issues that they may have been plagued with for a long time. We were able to help them achieve some objectives and major goals and vision that they had for their organization through our partnership and being able to work with them. So right now, we're super excited with all the involvement that we get. We love working with wind farms or other organizations. It's exciting, it's fun, and that's, I think we are passionate about it, and that's what makes it really, really neat for us.
Yeah. So Dan, let me kick this to you. So as the CTO for the company, you're pretty heavily involved with wind sites. So can you tell me a little bit about and touch on what Byron just mentioned, which is that people often don't know what they need, and wind farms are incredibly complex. So can you touch a little bit about your role within getting IT properly into the hands of, or not into the hands, but connected on a wind site?
Yeah, it's true because, they have a lot of, when you come to a wind farm, there is a ton of needs. There's a ton of networks. And anytime you have one network, you have needs. Now you add in a dozen networks all in one, and only 2 of them you actually ever touch on a daily basis. The needs are astronomical, and you have very, very limited time to work when you're a wind operator, the plant manager, or however your organization is laid out. You don't have the time. You understand how turbines work. You understand how the mechanical side works completely, and you probably have some understanding of how the technical side works. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of the age-old, it's probably better off to spend your time optimizing your turbines or doing whatever maintenance needs to be done than it is for you to be figuring out how to reset passwords and how to set up systems so they don't fail. And that's where really we come in. We're going to come in and we look at the big picture. How do we get from what you have today to what we need to have tomorrow, and what we're going to need to have next week and next year and 5 years from now? And we try to make a plan, and we build a plan that we can build on together as a partner. And just like we fully invest ourselves in that site, and we want to fully kind of realize the potential of that site wherever we can. So if you need help with automation, if you need help with networking, if you need help with server side applications, things of that nature, we're definitely going to come in. We're going to look at everything from start to finish and have a kind of a holistic picture of the entire farm.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a set it and forget it situation, right? You put in infrastructure and systems, and for as much as we would like it to be kind of a just set it up one time and then not have to worry about it, it's not that way. And we want to make sure that, again, it's optimized, it's automated, as well as that, we're not going to have any surprise downtime or outages or impact of the organization. So, there's a lot that we invest into it, but we work with our partners or the farms to work together on their objectives and what's important to them and help them accomplish their goals.
Yeah. So obviously you guys are going to support, all the employees and help people manage their laptops and their software and their connectedness, their networks, all that stuff. But also obviously the big thing is they're monitoring these machines more than ever by, it's just like with a car, right? Like in high school, I had a 67 Bronco. My brother worked on an old Mustang, and we could do like pretty much anything on those old cars, right? Today, it's a huge chore to even change my oil, right? So obviously technology on wind farms has changed as well, but it's pretty much catastrophic now if like there was a major outage, right? Like thousands and thousands of dollars will be lost if they can't get back online quickly, or they can't monitor, or they're just not sure what's going on. So can you talk a little bit about some of those, I think, big fears that wind site operators have, where they're like, we can't have this go down? Just like an e-commerce website. You can't have your sneaker store go down for a day because you lost 30 grand in revenue, right?
With power prices down, now the revenue is much more important. And as you're generating, and you want to make sure you capitalize on that. And one penalty for missing a dispatch or missing a limit could wipe out all the revenue you made for this month. And that would be crazy. That's a horrible thing to do. I mean, 1 hour of missing a dispatch and overproducing could actually cost you more than you could make in the entire month before. So I think it's more critical than ever to have proper reporting and proper visibility into those systems.
Yeah, it is a lot about penalty avoidance, and how systems are managed and how things are controlled. And that's why, some of these elements, even just the dispatching piece, is so critical, whether it's manual or automated, is because if they do get off track, then the penalties can be pretty harsh pretty quickly. It only takes, 15, 20 minutes of not reporting accurately that penalties start coming.
Yeah. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with the grid dispatch system, can you guys just give a quick overview of, what is it, how does it work, and where do those penalties come from, and who enforces those penalties?
Yeah. So you're the balancing authority you work with is the one who really generates your dispatch. So depending on who it is, they have each, and that's the one thing that's interesting about wind farms is they're all the same, but they're all so different. And whatever balancing authority you're with, they're the ones who send the dispatch, and they say, hey, produce 100 megawatts. So you set your system to generate 100 megawatts and feed it back into the grid. And then they'll, it can be every hour, it can be every 5 minutes. And that's where the automation component comes in. But a new dispatch can come down and say, you know what, you're good. Ramp up to full power. We need it. We need to set it to California. So they don't have a brownout or whatnot. But you'll get different dispatches throughout the day. You can have them. I've seen them as often as every 30 seconds. It just depends on the system and really the power needs of the grid at the time. The weird part is some dispatches come in differently. Some are going to be forced manually. They come in via, especially when you're set to 0, meaning you've been limited to 0 megawatts or 0 generation at all. Those usually come in manually via some other method, an email. And it's about correlating how that is. And then they'll come back, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, and they'll say, you know what, this has been lifted. You can go back to your regularly scheduled dispatch schedule, which would be back to the automated system. Every 30 minutes it'll update or whatnot.
Yeah, so the challenge is too is that operates 24/7. So that dispatch and scheduling, and at any point, and oftentimes, when there is an issue, it's going to happen in the middle of the night in the AM hours, right?
Yeah, of course.
Most everybody's sleeping, and so that's where it's kind of like, yeah, you can have manual systems, and they can catch it sometimes, and they often do, but if it's not automated, then there's a potential lapse, and who knows how long that lapse is before the generation is corrected or the dispatch scheduling is corrected.
And so is that something you guys can put in place? Like, you guys help companies figure out how to monitor those better, or to set up an alert system, to set up a way to write itself? I mean, how do you solve that problem?
Well, that is something that we we have worked on and have some systems in place, but it continues to evolve and develop and mature. I mean, it's not, there's definitely not perfect, because again, there's only so many things that are in our control, and what we can do is, and there's only so many things in the control of the farm as well, because they have to work with the reporting authority or with the authority that they're dealing with on that. And there is plenty. I mean, what's neat about it is Dan and I have had several conversations is, there's a lot of opportunity to do more and to improve. And we're continuing to work with the farms that we deal with to improve those circumstances and situations.
Yeah, and that's really there's so many opportunities. We have, with machine learning models and things of that nature, we can do a lot more than we used to be able to do. So every day it's a constant evolution, and it's almost like 10 years ago we were in the alpha stages of the automation of that, and maybe 5 years ago we moved into kind of a beta stage of, and I mean technology as a whole for that kind of automation. We moved into kind of a beta stage, and that was kind of a testing phase. How is this going to work? And really today, I feel like we're about there where a lot of these things are going to be able to be automated. And I'm sure, depending on the balancing authority and the scheduler, there might already be some farms that have it fully automated and fully together. And that's really the end goal, is how can we limit, while we still need to inspect it, we still need a human to make sure that our schedules are set right, because we want to make sure that things are working properly and optimally. But how can we limit the amount of touch points that we have to, which really eliminates some cost for the site and also helps with that penalty avoidance. If the system is working and functioning properly, we're able to really generate the most profit for the customer at the end of the day. And that's really what our goal is as a partner, in that we want to do whatever we can to help the business be more successful.
I think ultimately one of the challenges too, Dan, based on kind of our current conversation and what we've talked about before, is the constant change in technology, right? So from one farm to the next, and it could be a matter of even just 12 months, 24 months, the technology changes significantly. Not only on the technology of the generation, the power generation, but also the technology in how the IT infrastructure supports that generation and supports those systems. Everybody knows software is changing and evolving and updating all the time. Well, I mean, there's a lot of, in older farms, there's a lot of software that it's the same as it was in day one. And then you have to continue to support it through advancements of other technology. And so now we have legacy systems, software, and so forth that we have to continue to support or manage and maintain, while at the same time look at ways to improve automation or alerting or other things to make sure that the impact to their organization, to the systems, is non-existent or minimal.
Yeah, so one thing you mentioned earlier that I want to touch on. So it's funny, I was listening to a podcast recently called How I Built This. It's one of my favorites. Do you guys ever listen to that one? It's pretty good. It's with Guy Raz. It's an NPR podcast, but they talk about, lots of popular businesses, how they got started. And it's kind of like their founder story and a lot of their challenges, and it's real in depth and interesting. But so one of them recently that I was listening to was about an app for doctors' offices. And obviously it's a very modern thing. Like you have that's for everything now, right? But this guy was going around, him and his business partner, trying to connect doctors' offices, say, hey, you want your scheduling to be on our app, so now people can just have their phone and they can look through a list of doctors in the area and they can book directly into your clinic. Like, this is a great service. And so as they started to get traction, one of the problems that they came up with, which is kind of what you guys were alluding to earlier, is that they couldn't even integrate their calendar with some of the antiquated systems that the doctors use. Like, some of the doctors just had like Post-it notes, like, oh, I'm out of the office all day, right, on the computer. It's like, you can't integrate software with a Post-it note, right? So I feel like that is one of the big probably challenges with a lot of these sites, where when you guys go in there, is it the case where a lot of times you're like, oh man, they've really waited a long time to upgrade, and I'm sure it's really challenging to even figure out where to start to integrate some software that just might almost be obsolete. I mean, is that a big challenge?
It's a significant challenge. I mean, it's a challenge I think in most industries where, you have your mainstream bleeding edge, or billion-dollar software companies that are just advancing and moving forward like nothing else. But anytime you narrow down into a specific industry, whether it's wind farms or even the medical that you mentioned, at that point, I mean, they're several years behind, because the cost and time and money and development to advance that technology forward is significant. And so our challenge as a provider and working with our clients is how to work with those antiquated systems with modern day expectations, right? Because, everybody you talk to, I want that app. I want that app for my home automation. I want that app for my business automation. I want it for everything, right? I don't want to have to, for convenience, I'm lazy, whatever it is, or a quick response. I want that available at my fingertips. But the challenge in reality is that the individual industries don't keep up. Yeah. And how do we manage the expectations with the technology, and then bridging the gap between the technology that has advanced and the technology that is still several years behind?
And that's one area. The bridging the gap is the important section there. Is that a wind site or any SCADA system really is going to be designed for maximum reliability. It's not designed. I mean, they are designed to be secure, but there's a lot of planning that goes into securing the entire system at the edge so that people can't get into it. But once you get into it, it can be a little bit more open and a free-for-all. But they don't design these softwares to really be upgraded all the time, and so you're stuck with them for maybe 10, 15 years, whereas a normal ERP Yikes. Or CRM's lifespan is, maybe 4 or 5 years in a business. Some businesses push it longer. But it's really, how do you bridge the gap? Because you can't go change what GE does. You aren't big enough to put enough pressure on GE to make the change, or you can't put enough pressure on Siemens Gamesa to make their software change. You can put a little pressure maybe on your site rep or your local guy, but it's not gonna make a full system upgrade.
But it's not going to influence it. And oftentimes they've moved on. They may have had advancements with software, but it's not the software you're running. It's not the systems you're running. It's their next generation system. And so now you're stuck with Siemens or whatever systems and products that you have that they built out 10 years ago, But what they have now is not an advancement of what you've got. It's new.
So you're building there's a lot of integrations you have to build, and whether that's custom code, whether that's you have to manipulate the data as it comes and change it from a format that you can understand. That's really where a lot of the work in kind of moving these businesses forward comes into play.
And how does the age of the Win site come into play? Because if this has been around for 14 years, is the shelf life, with 6 years to go on a lot of turbines, is that going to influence what they're willing to do? Or if it's, only a couple of years old? I mean, I guess part of my question here is, do you guys get a lot of business from brand new sites, or are companies really in IT need later on in the lifetime? Like, where does it seem to fall where they start to really need to either upgrade or change things?
I think when it comes to the farms, it typically is when they're having issues, right? And oftentimes they're issues that they've been dealing with for some time, right? Or they're trying to accomplish something and they've been struggling with it, an objective that they have been unable to attain. And so via word of mouth, or, hey, we've got these guys that have been able to help us, is typically how we get involved and where we step in.
I wish it was when they were new.
I wish
that
it was
would
a little bit more proactive,
nice.
but it's a lot of times it's not proactive. It's just when there's pain associated with it, and or something like that.
Yeah. Well, so we've had a couple recent guests on the show talking about how they, their software and their consulting and their solutions will help, improve optimization of wind turbines and upgrade a lot of software, and they do a lot of modeling and all sorts of different techniques to upgrade, these sites, because everyone's fighting that slow loss of power over the years, right? Is that a fundamentally different thing, or is that kind of what you said, addressing that pain point?
It's because we're adding a new system at that point. It all depends on how the farm's laid out, how their sites are, how their security is in terms of their cybersecurity. If we can really accomplish that easily, I mean, it's always accomplishable. It's just a matter of how you do it, and it really depends on each site and how they're set up and what kind of integrations they already have with their vendor. There's some sites that have a little bit more integration capability. There's some sites where they don't have any at all. So it's really dependent on each situation. But some of those analytics and things like that are, quite frankly, it's amazing. I wish I would have came up with the idea, because it's pretty cool when you read it. And as you're reading through the documents, I mean, just the smallest 1 degree tweak can maybe extend that or change that, that leading edge erosion, and maybe give you 2 or 3 years of blade life out of that. Or, the things that we wouldn't notice, even from the IT side, and we can see the data. I can see all of the data as it's coming in. I wouldn't notice that the gear oil is just a little bit too warm, or that, because it's within bounds, but it may not be optimized.
The challenge for us on that standpoint is that we're, typically, that's a layer coming in on top of already existing infrastructure systems. So software or other elements that are plugging into the data that they have got. So we work with the farms and those third-party analytical systems to help make sure to connect them together, right? So that they can feed that information into their systems and have that data and information to be able to see and be able to make those fine-tune adjustments to get better longevity out of their generation.
Let's talk a little bit more about that power generation aspect of it. So has this changed significantly over the last couple of years? I mean, is analytics changing like fundamentally the way power generation works? I mean, where does the software side, like, what have you guys found either interesting or troubling, or just like you said, Dan, you're like, it's a super innovative thing. All like we can control, we have analytics on literally everything. Like, I'm a big baseball guy. The amount of analysis we can do on, little kids throwing a ball across the diamond is crazy. But, tell me a little bit about power generation and how that's all changed.
Yeah, I think I don't know if the analytics has changed the power generation component. I think it's really helped with the longevity of the turbines. Things of, if you can get just, I mean, as we said earlier, power costs or wholesale power prices are pretty low right now. So if you can eke out an extra megawatt each month just by kind of adjusting a blade a degree, or you don't have that big crane bill because you had to have a crane crew come out and swap something out because you were able to proactively doing it. It's like a lot of it's almost like changing. It's like swapping from, I don't know, conventional oil to synthetic oil in your car. It's just a matter of doing things proactively to help extend the life of that turbine. You know, you spend $1 million each turbine. You want to try to make $2 million or $3 million off each turbine before they go end of life, or before you have to do a massive, kind of upgrade to them. And it's really expensive to have a crane crew come out because we're at wind sites. And as every wind tech or wind operator knows, the wind blows at wind sites, and crane guys don't like to be, they aren't up there in the wind. So they usually sit out there, and it's a hurry up and wait kind of deal where they sit there and they wait in the cab of the crane until the wind stops blowing enough for them to go up tower and swap out a generator, or, if they have to take a blade down or whatever has to happen. And that can be, they may be up there for 2, 3, 4 days, and you're paying that crane crew the whole time. So if you can avoid that huge cost of swapping out that generator or doing some other crazy maintenance just by adjusting kind of the pitch or adjusting something else in the turbine, it's probably a worthy endeavor. And you may not ever be able to fully realize how you can, or quantify really the total cost or the total benefit. But I think not having those astronomical bills by doing some proactive work is huge.
So one question that I have for you guys, which I feel like it's tough for people to know when the cost and when the cost benefit is in their favor. So I'm sure there's lots of sites are like, you know what, we probably should upgrade. Like, our system's getting pretty old. We could use one of these, sleeker systems that have more automation, whatever it is. But if you guys go in and you're saying, hey, this is so outdated that it's going to be really, really time consuming and expensive to upgrade, like where does it fall for a wind site? And where would you guys maybe advise someone, like, look, this might not be worth it. It's going to be so much work and so much, such a huge expense that given, your P&L and just the economics of this and the scale of this, that it just might not make sense to come into the 21st century as far as tech. I mean, is that a conversation that is ever had?
Those conversations happen all the time. And it's like nonstop. I mean, it's everything, right? So there's multiple, let me split this out in multiple components for you, because really there's a couple aspects. One is you got the basic hygiene or systems, right? That you just typical life cycle. There's all the computers, IT, switches, routers. There's limited lifespan on all of those things, and so there's the basic conversation around. Okay, what we don't want to wait too long because then they just start dying off, right? So we have to plan, forecast simple life cycling of equipment. Okay, so there's that component, and that also comes into play with operating systems. Last year we had the massive push to replace Windows 7 computers or servers as well that were end of life, and so there was a big push last year for everybody swapping those things out, and so there's that kind of fundamental element that we have to talk to clients about, and that's a challenge all the time anyway, just that basic stuff, because what's the first thing they think? Man, I just got that a couple years ago, and when you're talking about this equipment that needs to be replaced every 4, maybe 5 years, depending on what it is, that's a massive capital expenditure. It's a budgetary item, so there's planning for it. But that stuff is kind of the base level, right? But after that, you have the additional higher level conversation of what can we do to improve improve efficiencies? What can we do to help push the vision of the organization forward? And then how do we overcome the obstacles of running old software on brand new hardware, for example? Or how do we run these old systems on brand? So there's a lot of compatibility issues and other challenges that are constantly being overcome. But as far as people wanting to do those things, I don't think it's like, do I want to go to the dentist? Not really, not
Yeah.
all the time. But I do know that if I don't go, if I don't take care of myself, then it's going to get worse later on. And so there is a lot of hesitation sometimes. But I think through experience, most people realize that, if I don't do it now, it's just going to get worse. And I'm just going to handle it, face it, plan for it. And so it's just bringing that stuff. And what's a challenge off the time is they don't know what they don't know, right? And so for us, it's communicating, hey, just so you're aware, FYI, keep this in mind, and communicating, making them aware, keeping it in front of them so that they can make those good decisions, and versus, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. And then it slaps them in the face and they have an issue, or something happens, or they have a surprise expenditure that's significant. Those are all things we try to avoid.
Well, it's about structure. How do you structure that conversation so that the plant operator, the site manager, whomever you're discussing it with, understands the risk and the reward, and there can be large costs involved in some of those upgrades. But what's the risk of downtime? If you can't get to your data, if you can't do your reporting for a week or 2 weeks, and these sites are remote typically, they're not just down the street. You can't just jump in the car. I think the closest entry to a wind site around here is probably, I don't know, an hour. That's maybe the closest entry point to one of them. So that's not too far, but they're pretty remote. They aren't going to be. They can't just run down the street and grab a new server and plug it in and be off to the races. It's going to take time. So how do you avoid, and I guess it goes back almost to that penalty avoidance a little bit, but it's about structuring that conversation as to, well, we need to upgrade. And why do we need to upgrade? Well, we have a lot of risk. If one of our users gets ransomware on an unsupported computer, or gets some other type of malware from running an old Windows 7 computer, it's not supported, not getting Microsoft updates, not getting other updates, it's not secure. There's a lot of risk that comes into it. And with banks and with wind farms and really regulated industries, there's almost pressure that comes from the government side where they kind of have to upgrade. And, that does work both in our favor and against us occasionally. But, it's about structure. It's about laying it out there for them in a way they understand it, because they get on Google, they see an article from a source online or whatever that comes in and says, well, upgrade your systems now because it's not secure. And they can kind of brush it off because they don't trust where that data comes from. Whereas if a partner comes in, and that's what we always try to be, if a partner comes in and lays it out there for them and gives it to them straight, they're more apt to make a decision based on that good information and that trustworthy source than they are from reading an article on TechNet or something.
Yeah, that strikes me as a good application for. So one of my favorite books is called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a former poker player, right? Maybe she's still a professional poker player, but her book talks about structuring decisions based on like percentages. So, like, I play a little poker casually, and given a certain hand in a certain situation, you're like, okay, well, if I have this hand and there's two other people in, if I make X bet, I might get, everyone to fold 20% of the time, no one folds 40% of the time, and other result some percentage of the time. But when I was listening to you guys talk about, these systems get towards their end of their life, and you don't want to go to the very end of life because, like you said, Byron, they start to just die off, right? Your car gets super old, it starts to break down more often. And so you could say, okay, well, our Windows 7 system is now 5 years old. They recommend it be upgraded at 5 years. So now is it like we have a 60% chance of having consistent breakdowns, whereas 4 years ago we had a 10% chance of having consistent breakdowns? Is there like it feels like upgrading stuff that's not necessarily broken today is probably a hard sell, because we're like, well, my computer's working today. We haven't been hacked today. Like, why would I upgrade now if I'm not going to get hacked for sure tomorrow? So is it like that balance where the percentage that something bad happens is significantly, like, is that a way to frame that? Because like I said, it seems like it can kind of be by feel, like you should do this now because it is more likely to happen. But can you put a number on any of that kind of stuff?
There's a lot of research and statistics and information that does show the increased risk or the increased probability of equipment failure after a certain time. So there is statistics that is out there that we do use at times that show the probability of equipment and things failing, and and it's often not just one appliance or one device that fails, but it seems to be a cascading effect often too, where one system starts going and then closely the other, and then closely the next. And so that's kind of the thing that we try to avoid too. And what we communicate is that look, it's that we're not talking about that one thing that one thing might fail. It's just, it usually seems to come in batches, and then it becomes a bigger issue. It balloons, and it's problematic, and we try to avoid that. When people think of IT in general, often they might think of somebody, again, touching the keyboard or opening up a computer or doing some sort of, technical guru or technical mumbo jumbo stuff. But the reality of what we do oftentimes is it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of education. It's a lot of providing information to those that need to be able to make good decisions. And because without the right information or good information, then they're winging it. It's like you said, it's kind of how their gut feels. It's how do they feel? Well, it's running now. It's running today. It's only 3 or 4 or 5 years old. Let's get a couple years out of it, and so us being able to communicate with them and provide that information from anywhere low level tech to high level tech and make sense to them, then that's empowering to them. Then they can drive good decisions. And that's really, what we try to achieve.
Well, the other part is making the right, like you said, the good decision, the right decision, because as a partner in this, it's about what is going to fulfill the farm's needs or the needs of the end user anyway. It doesn't matter who it is. I've walked into a business before. They had just spent $300,000 on a new piece of hardware. They could have spent, I'm dead serious, $30,000 on a piece of hardware that would have been more than adequate for their needs.
You didn't tell them that, did you?
Yeah, I think I did.
Did they throw a chair at you?
They weren't thrilled, but the reality is that it's about speccing out the right solution as well, because just because the vendor that you're working with, HP, Dell, whoever, if it's you're talking hardware or Cisco, if we're talking switching, or whoever, there's industrial switching as well, they'll sell you more than you need every time. They're really good at it, but that's not always what you need. Sure, it would be amazing to have an all-flash 5,000 terabyte drive array. Your performance will be great, but you could do the same thing for a quarter of the cost. And that's where it comes into play is we're, I don't want to say an intermediary, but we always operate as an extension of the business. It's making the right decision. I would rather that extra $100,000 go to another capital project, which will improve another part of the farm, versus overspending on hardware here that you're really not ever going to realize its potential.
Yeah. We see that frequently, unfortunately, where, an organization is working with a variety of different vendors, right? And this vendor for this vendor for that. And it's just systems get implemented all over the place. And not that those systems are bad, but trying to tie them all together or making the right call on where to best make that expenditure can be all over the place sometimes. And it makes a real mess, because oftentimes some of these vendors or systems even conflict quite a bit. And then you're fighting, then they're fighting each other as far as, being able to operate or obstacles that are in place. And that just becomes really frustrating and challenging.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because like with technology, like for those of you watching on YouTube, like this is a good 4K camera. You guys have actually the same camera. You could buy an 8K camera for $5,000, right? You could but YouTube compresses the video anyway, where when you like really do your research, it's like, well, an 8K camera is almost the same thing as a 4K camera, which is almost the same thing as a 1080 camera. when you compress it and send it through the web and, it gets to someone's tiny little smartphone screen, right? So I think that makes sense where someone like you can tell someone like, yeah, this is a top of the line product, but you just don't need it. Like it's going to be overkill for your application.
Yeah, it's about fitting the solution to the need, right? And because we do not Band-Aid, we do not duct tape, and we avoid that at all costs. We want the right solution, but the right solution often isn't the most expensive solution. It's definitely not the most cheapest solution most of the time, but it's making the right fit. And that's where, having a firm understanding of the need of the organization, their objective, as well as the technology, and bringing that together.
And how do you balance that with, so like obviously like a challenge. So like I have I'm a Windows and Mac user. But
does that even exist? A Windows and a Mac user? I mean, come on.
We'll have to talk about this on camera why I have both, but it's because of Apple's just asinine policies with soldering in their boards and all this stuff. But anyway, but they released a new computer right in the fall with the new chips, really exciting. Everyone's like, I want this. This is amazing. But if I wait 6 months, they're gonna definitely have another version of this, right? So like, how do you when you approach a company, if they're like, hey, we're at year 4 and we know we need to upgrade at year 5, what should we upgrade to? Is that a really tough conversation to have where it's like, hey, technology's changing so fast, like every 2 years there's like a new solution that's way better. It's almost worth waiting for sometimes. How do you balance telling companies to wait versus like, yeah, let's do this now, even though maybe in the back of your mind you're like, there might be something great coming out. We don't know what's coming out, but I feel like that's a really tough challenge with tech is like, when do you actually upgrade?
I think when it comes to tech and, if we're talking specifically about a Win site or something like that, we aren't going to go cutting edge. There's too much risk in going cutting edge.
Being like a beta tester almost.
Be a beta tester for something that needs 100% uptime. You go with, and I'm not saying we go with technology that's old, but we go with what's been tested in the field. We know that we have an awesome opportunity because we work with all types of businesses. A 3-man dental office, they can be a beta tester. I mean, worse, it's just not true. That's not true. They're not going to be a beta tester, but they effectively can operate as a beta tester for us for some solutions if it's in terms of a hardware solution. And so when you get to a Winsight level, though, you're not as worried. Performance isn't as huge of a deal, and pretty much all technology changes is all about increasing performance. Now, there's software that is, cutting edge, and that you might use, but software is a lot easier to change if you just implemented it and it's not working for your needs than hardware. You go spend $250,000, $300,000 on hardware, and your board or whoever the ownership or whoever you have to answer to is not going to let you go, well, you know what? I know that you bought that last year. Let's replace it though, because it's not working right. So you really do have to plan the solution. You have to look at what your needs are going to be and project for 5 years, project for maybe even 7 years.
I think the challenge that we see a lot is a lot of mismatch between hardware and the actual application implementation configuration of the hardware or software systems that have been deployed and installed. I mean, just recently we did a systems assessment for an organization that had 5 months ago, put in all new equipment, new servers, and they're like, man, we're just not seeing the performance. We're not seeing our expectations where we were going to have this. We're not seeing it, and we're concerned. And so we went and took a look at it, did a kind of a basic assessment, and right off the bat, it was clear that they had great hardware, fantastic hardware, new hardware, but whoever did the implementation and deployment really didn't know as well. I mean, what they did wasn't bad, but it did not take advantage of the hardware as far as the ability to maximize the performance and efficiencies of the systems that they had. Did it still work? Yeah, it worked, but not, basically they paid a lot of extra money for things that they couldn't even leverage and use at this point because of how it was set up.
So the last thing I want to cover today is cybersecurity. So obviously, like the big SolarWinds hack made a ton of news, the tail end of 2020. and we've chatted about that a little bit off camera here. So cybersecurity is a really scary thing, and I think this also falls in that same bucket. I mean, I feel this personally. I haven't been hacked yet. I feel like I'm okay, but I also don't know what I'm doing. And I think for a lot of companies, they probably just are essentially like leaving their back and front door open and just like assuming that no one will walk in. I mean, tell me about cybersecurity on a Win site.
Well, Dan mentioned it a little bit earlier, where historically the focus was secure the edge, secure the perimeter. You got a good firewall, you get antivirus, and you're set, right? And that's kind of what, look 5 years ago or some, looking at that, that was adequate at the time. But what's happened now is, there's a lot of systems that are breached, and these cybersecurity folks, cybersecurity bad actors, they move laterally significant within organizations and systems. So Dan mentioned that, they have great firewalls and great edge perimeter security, but pretty light on the inside. Well, these bad actors, they know that. All they have to do is get a toe, a finger, in, a foot in there, a foothold, and then from there, they have all the time in the world, oftentimes, and before they're detected, and so they just take their sweet time and move laterally within the organization. So, and that can start anywhere from a phishing email that somebody gets to malware from a phone that somebody brings internally. There's a lot of ways where they can get in, and then they just start moving from there. But you brought up the SolarWinds breach, which happened in December, which was, I would say it shook the foundation of the cybersecurity world because of the massive nature of the breach and because how it occurred. SolarWinds is a major IT monitoring and alerting tool, management tool that is used globally for organizations that are, federal organizations, state organizations, and a lot of private organizations. That's how they watch and monitor, manage their systems, their infrastructure, their servers and equipment. And SolarWinds was breached. And then from that standpoint, once SolarWinds was breached, the bad actors embedded malware into the SolarWinds software updates. So me as an IT support person, that's one of my trusted tools. We don't use it, but just in that particular, there's hundreds of thousands of IT or organizations. That's the trusted tool, and so they ran and pushed out these updates. And if I'm that company, and I'm the IT, I'm downloading the updates and pushing it out in all my systems, and that essentially was a backdoor for the bad actors to then gain access to. It was somewhere, 128 big organizations. Know. Yeah, we have no idea.
We'll never know the truth of what they hit. So
they know at least 18,000 organizations downloaded the compromised updates, and of those 18,000, they have no clue at this point. I mean, the numbers every day almost. We're hearing of another, announcement where an organization is affirming or recognizing that they have been breached by this hack. So, for farms, it's the biggest challenge one of the biggest challenges again is now we have to look at increased security, not only from the perimeter standpoint, but every aspect, every piece of the infrastructure, every piece of the IT, any device that's connected. We have to look at the cyber piece and how it's protected.
I think when it comes to wind farms, wind sites, really any big organization like that, it shows that you can't just set it and forget it. You can't just put a firewall in place and walk away and be all hunky-dory. You do have to constantly monitor, constantly evolve. 5 years ago, an attack like the SolarWinds thing probably couldn't have happened. As things change in the way that and especially with people being more connected to the internet than ever before, as you go from, the way it was several years ago, we may have had cloud-based email, and maybe you were browsing a website occasionally, but now everything you do, every vendor you talk to, everything you do touches the internet, whether it's on your personal phone, your work computer, your work phone, it's all touching the internet.
Here's a lot of people say, I'm just this one farm, or I'm just this one organization. I'm small, I'm insignificant, I'm nobody, right? Like what Dan said, I mean, we did it this week where we had a presentation with a, with another assessment another utility company that we did an audit on. And we just pulled up their logs and just said, hey, look, here's all the countries or the areas that are tapping at your front door. They're knocking on the door. They're there. And it's just amazing to see their eyes just go, whoa, oh, yeah, they are. And, the other statistic that is scary that people don't realize is, I mean, there's kind of a myth that, if I get hacked, I'm going to know about it. I'm going to know about it right away, or I'm going to get something's going to happen. But what people don't realize is the average time a bad actor is in a network before they even notice it is 6 months. And the SolarWinds breach that happened, it took them over a year to figure it out. And the only reason they figured it out is because this cybersecurity firm, FireEye, got breached. And they like, whoa, hey, how did we get breached? And they did their investigation. And then they determined, they figured it out that it was SolarWinds, Orion, that software that had been breached. And through the supply chain, FireEye then became vulnerable and breached. And
the Department of Justice.
Department of Homeland Security, and
Microsoft.
Microsoft, VMware. I mean, you go through the list.
But not Apple,
Cisco,
I guess.
Intel. I mean, all those were breached. And so it's a scary world a little bit. And what I am telling individuals, organizations, companies is basically at this point you need to plan to be breached, because you will be. You will. How big, how small, I don't know. But you need to plan on it. So what do we do now to mitigate the risk and then have a good plan in place for when something does happen? Because it will happen. There's no question. Even between just Washington State, for example, I was looking at this yesterday. The reported breaches for Washington State went from 300,000 to over 600,000 in 1 year. And these are just the reported breaches. I'm hearing of local breaches in our area, our region, every week. I mean, my neighbor across the street I found out last week, a firm that, they were down for several days, and anyway, so there is a critical element to, and for me, it's not an overnight fix, right? We can't just say, hey, let's implement these tools, because a lot of cybersecurity really isn't just tools. It's planning, it's strategy, it's conversation, it's culture, it's a lot of administrative stuff too, where make sure we have policies and procedures in place. So there's a lot to it. I think the challenge right now for farms or any organization is really talking about it and knowing what to talk about and putting the time against it. Because quite frankly, I mean, who wants to, hey, I'm really excited to go talk about and do cybersecurity stuff. If I'm an owner or executive or director, I'm busy. I got lots of things to do. But unfortunately, just the state of things now is it's bubbling up. The cybersecurity is bubbling up quite a bit, and the priority and critical impact and nature of that is making it much, much more of a priority. In 2021, we're going to see continued changes from the attack side and how it's going to impact business. And it's going to be a lot more front of mind for a lot of people.
I think an important piece too is you can't just buy a tool and expect it to fix the problem. That's a big takeaway. A lot of vendors, a lot of companies even, they think, okay, I'll spend X number of dollars and that will fix my problem. And
the spam blocker 5,000 won't do it. What about the spam blocker 6,000?
That might, 7,500 I hear is top notch. But you can't just buy a tool and expect it to work, to fix your problem. You need to, it's kind of a whole, there's a suite of tools, there's a layered, I like to think of it like an onion. Each layer protects another layer. The there's a layer, you layer tools in, but you also know how to use them and understand what they're doing and how they work. And it goes back to the other problem. The most expensive tool may not be the best tool for you. It's about coming up with an approach that can, a layered approach that can really help your cybersecurity hygiene. Like you said, there's open doors everywhere. And, and to the point about a lot of businesses thinking, well, I'm small potatoes, they're not going to come after me. Well, yeah, probably people aren't probably going to target you directly. But if they come across you, there are scanners on the internet. If you can go to Shodan.io or wherever, look up wind farms that are actually on the internet, SCADA systems that are actually exposed to the internet. You can do a Google search and find IP addresses for wind farms and for SCADA systems and things like that. And that's people are doing that, and people are bored in other countries. They're thinking ways they can extort, or they're just trying to see what they can do. So just because you're small potatoes, you're not GE, you're not Microsoft, you don't have billions of dollars to pay a ransom notice, they don't care. They're just scanning and casting a wide net, and whatever they catch, they keep.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. They get so many companies. If we're talking specifically ransomware, it's a numbers game. If they get so many organizations or businesses to pay ransom, it adds up fast. I mean, it's $1 billion industry right now, ransomware. I mean, these guys make a ton of money. And, and a lot of the biggest producers of ransomware are nation sponsored. You got Russia, North Korea, and some other, countries where it's very organized and they're very good. I mean, heck, I don't even have to really, I could go get some ransomware today and push it out and email it out. I don't even have to make it. I can buy it. You look at Microsoft and Salesforce and all these others organizations that have these software as a service applications and platforms. The exact same thing is available online for ransomware and malware. I could subscribe as a bad guy. I could subscribe to ransomware as a service and go online to a user portal, and say, I want this ransomware. I want it to do these things. Let me upload my list and send it to these people. And then there you go. You hit send, it goes, and then it's automated. It's not these guys that are in the basement with hoodies doing hacking. No, this is very well organized, and they have attorneys, they have accountants.
Well, don't worry though. They have English-speaking customer support. So if you have any issues, just dial them up and you're good to go.
They do. They have professional. they have help desk support when you do get ransomware, and they're very good at helping you through the process and paying that ransom.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, there'd be like a Fisher Price, my first ransomware kit coming out soon.
That's what it is. Beginner.
It's the next Onion article, yeah.
So for us, the challenge right now is that things are moving so quickly around cybersecurity. The challenge is keeping our clients up to date, up to speed, not from the technical standpoint, but from the information standpoint and education standpoint. Client, dear client, here's a new threat, or here's a conversation that we need to have because things have overnight changed, like with the SolarWinds breach, right? Just now, all of a sudden, just broke the foundation, and we have to reevaluate so many different things that we didn't even have to think about before. So 12 months ago, how and what we did for cybersecurity is now very different today. What worked 12 months ago does not work today. And that's the constant conversation that we're having to have with clients. And that is a challenge because it's so much information, so much volume. And the reality is they're not going to be able to comprehend or understand or keep up with it all themselves, right? And even for us, letting them know, hey, this is what we need to do. So, the biggest thing for us is making the recommendations, helping them best understand, and then the businesses, the clients, making budget available to be able to invest in cybersecurity. I think the stat, it's an old stat. It was probably mid 2020 or even beginning of 2020, where 71% of technology spend for organizations was going to start going towards cybersecurity. The increase 71% or something like that. So it was going to be massive changes. And another aspect to the cybersecurity is not even the technology; it's the people. It's the user, because we can invest tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars in cybersecurity. All it takes is one person, one user, to bypass all of that.
And that person is my dad. He's done it twice in the last year. I'm like, Dad, just come on.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much we watch.
It's about training.
Training.
It's about training. Don't plug that USB drive that you found in the parking lot in. Turn it into the IT department. Turn it into somebody that knows how to check it. And there.
Yeah.
Don't plug in. Don't order random. If somebody ships you a USB drive in the mail, I don't care if it's a vendor or anything else, do not plug it into a production network ever. If you really feel the need to use it for some reason and you can't verify its source, do it in an offline environment. Talk to your IT department. Have somebody take care of it for you, but don't ever plug it into a production network somewhere. I don't care if it's a dental office. I don't care if it's a healthcare office, wind farm, bank. Doesn't matter. Don't plug it in.
Well, there's three really big avenues in which these bad actors attack and are able to gain access, and one is through social engineering, through people. It could be through phone calls, texting, and emails, right? And so that they get access by conning people, right, and fooling them into doing something, taking action, or giving up information that they wouldn't otherwise give up. So the big thing is building that human firewall. Everybody in the organization needs to have some element of consciousness around cybersecurity. They have to be aware, that, and understand that threats are coming from Facebook. They're coming from websites that they go to. It could be Google. Google ads will often have embedded malware in them that. Google does the best to clean that stuff out, keep it out, but it still happens. The other element to this is the physical aspect. There's a lot of people are traveling, and you go to the airport and they have the USB charging stations. For those road warriors, you really, really want to avoid public Wi-Fi systems and USB power charging stations, because those things are compromised. A lot of them are compromised. I mean, for the USB power stations, it's called juice jacking, and you plug that in, your USB cable into your device, your phone or laptop, and it's you're immediately compromised. You probably won't know about it right away because they're not going to announce it, but they're on your system. And then the other element where there's just a lot of whether it's social engineering or compromises or breaches or malware is social media. It's there. It is out there. It's rampant. It happens all the time. But the challenge is, again, it's not always obvious. In the past, it used to be if you got hacked or breached or something like that happened, there was almost like flashing lights and, hey, you've been hacked or breached. Nowadays, the bad actors, the bad guys, they don't want it. They don't want you to know. They want to be running in the background, and they do their homework. They investigate on LinkedIn. They want to find out who's who in the organization. So they'll try to manipulate emails as well, and trying to find out who's even at work. If they get an out of office notice, now they can. That's information they can use. They make a phone call and find out. So it's not just a one-time try. Once they start gathering information on you, they'll start adding that together and use that information against you.
Whenever we start an engagement, we do an assessment. Our first step is always to look at what's publicly available about this company. We get publicly available information, look at their email address, see what we can find with that. And that doesn't mean dark web. That doesn't mean I'm jumping on the dark web to go look at what I can find or I could buy. But I'm looking at what can I publicly get without spending any money. And it's actually amazing how much you can get just by having a server exposed to the internet. And now I know any vulnerabilities you have. I know the software version. I know your firewall version. And if any of those have active vulnerabilities or exploits, I might be able to just go buy an exploit toolkit off the internet, or just go buy a tool and exploit your firewall, exploit your server. If nothing else, I can do a denial of service attack and take you off the internet. Now nobody can get to that server, and it's probably going to crash on you. So, if nothing else, you can make people's days, they can make your day really long and tedious.
But guys, really appreciate the conversation today. This is a really wide-ranging topic on IT, and I think, like I said, I think it's a complicated subject to talk about, because people don't exactly always know what IT solutions they would need. I think software is really hard to stay up on, and like you said, you guys really connect companies with, and help them navigate what they do and don't need, because that is really, really tough. I mean, you think about how often people just research their Amazon purchases. Like, you're going to go buy, I'm looking around at plants and potters. Like, I'm going to go buy a planter for my pot. You go through 15 different types of planters for $15. And then you start talking about a $50,000, $100,000 upgrade to your IT system. Yeah, who's got time to really make informed decisions? So I think that makes a lot of sense, where companies can have someone to be the liaison and help them through that upgrade situation and integration and all that stuff. So Byron, I'll start with you. Where can people follow up with you and the company?
Website is Teknologize.com. And for me, anybody, if they have questions, they can reach me on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. And I think the other thing is happy to chat with anybody if they call in and talk with us on what we do a little bit. And honestly, we talk to so many people that aren't clients, and we just have a blast with it, and it's so much fun. And so, yeah, happy to chat with anybody and talk to them. But I think ultimately, we're here to help out our local community as well, because we're very community minded. And so there's a lot of things that we do here in our community just to help businesses in general.
I'm not a huge social media guy. Maybe it's because too much social hacking happens, but I love talking to businesses. I love the variety of work that that we kind of come across every day. So I love, you can always give us a call, Teknologize.com, or give us a call. You can get all of our information there. And if there's any needs or any unique needs that people have, that's our favorite thing to do, is come up with a creative solution. How do we get you from point A to point B the most effectively and the most reliably? And
your Twitter handle was at SpamBlocker7500, was that right?
Yeah, we're about to be 7,600. We'll see. It really depends. We're in the beta phases, so
my Twitter is real easy. It's Byron Martin.
Oh,
so
perfect. Well, yeah, for everyone listening, we will link to their company, LinkedIn, their social handles, and your YouTube channel. Obviously, you guys do YouTube videos as well. I've watched a bunch of them, so be sure to check out their YouTube channel, where they're just helping to teach and give you some quick tips about cybersecurity. So we'll link to all that stuff in the description, so be sure to check that out. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up today's episode of Uptime. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you're a regular here, thank you for your continued support. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to check out the WeatherGuard Lightning Tech YouTube channel for video episodes, full interviews, and short clips from each show. For Alan and all of us at WeatherGuard, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Is downtime causing you financial pain and putting a stop to your power production for months on end? It's no secret, lightning strike damage is a major cause of wind turbine downtime. This damage is preventable with our easy-to-install strike tape lightning protection system for wind turbine blades. Our incredible engineering, build quality, materials, and edge sealants withstand up to 5 times more abuse in the toughest weather and lightning conditions. And we've got the research to prove it. If you're tired of constant downtime, we can help. Reach out to us at weatherguardwind.com and schedule a free call. We'll get your uptime back in no time.